Well, after many months of mixed signals, Donald Trump revealing today who he thinks should have the final word on abortion.
My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people.
Well, that's a different take than the one he gave to a voter earlier this year during a town hall.
You've also blamed pro-lifers for some of the GOP losses around the country, and you've called heartbeat laws like Iowa's terrible. And so I'd just like some clarity on this because it's such an important question to me.
Okay.
I'd like for you to reassure me that you can protect all life, every person's right to life without compromise.
You wouldn't be asking that question, even talking about the issue, because for 54 years they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it. And I'm proud to have done it.
Joining me now, Rebekah Haynie. She's that anti-abortion voter who pressed Trump on abortion. And she joins me now. Rebekah, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I have to wonder, what is your reaction to Trump saying that states should chart their own path, essentially, on abortion?
Thanks for having me. And as I think you're hearing from a lot of the pro-life camp, we're extremely disappointed with Donald Trump taking the language of the left on this and leading on what he would now, even he used the term abortion rights. And that's a far cry from someone who claimed that he would be the most pro-life president and for a long time had been hailed for his pro-life credentials by conservatives like me, who gave him a lot of credit for many of those pro-life victories, the talking points that he used, the way that he defended life when he was in office. We really did appreciate. And now to come out and essentially surrender on this issue there are many words for it, but extremely disappointing as a mom. You know, the worst thing that you can be is just disappointed. And that's where I am right now with Donald Trump on life.
I use that same tactic with my own children. When I'm disappointed, it's far worse than me actually yelling about anything. But you know how former Vice President Mike Pence characterized it? He characterized it as a slap in the face. Those are the words that he used. Do you see it as that as well, something that it seems to be an intentional act or something more?
Well, it truly seems to be an unforced error. I think if we look on the political strategy side, I'm not sure who's advising him. This doesn't exactly come out of the blue. I was able to talk with Donald Trump about life on a similar town hall and on another network. And it was clear to me that he was a little bit wishy-washy on the line he was willing to draw, but he was still saying he would vote for, or rather he would defend life. And I think this is a true step backward. And I'm sure the strategy is to moderate on what he considers to be a more divisive issue. But it's not as though Donald Trump has ever had an issue taking a bold and divisive stand when he believed that it was either right to do or right politically. And so I do characterize this as a betrayal. I don't think that someone who is convicted on this issue and is willing to fight for the dignity of all life can really see it otherwise. And people can make their own decisions on this. But I mean, someone who has advocated for this, specifically this issue of justice for the preborn, but for all life, for humanity and human dignity, this is really just inexcusable.
So what is the consequence then? If the idea, you call it a betrayal and inexcusable, does that mean that it's enough to motivate you to still go to the ballot? Or is it something that would make you vote for somebody else or an alternative?
That's always going to be the question, isn't it? And I've seen statements from people wondering now, okay, what then? And I know this is where this conversation likes to go. I think that we need to reassert the standard. And if the standard is that every single life is worth protecting, then to be frank, I mean, Donald Trump has not performed according to what he knows. You know, we're both moms here. If your kid knows to do something right and doesn't do it, well, you know, then you have higher expectations of them, we'll just say. And so there's consequences. There have to be consequences for knowingly abandoning what you claimed at one time to be so incredibly important.
This is a very important issue, and important enough for you to have, asked the question of a presidential candidate, of a former president. Do you think that it is enough for people to opt against Donald Trump as a result of this answer?
So if pro-lifers, if this is our issue, there should be consequences, as I said. Perhaps this should cost Donald Trump the pro-life vote. Now, I know that we don't live in Pollyanna lollipop land, and people are going to start choosing between the choices that they have on the ballot. But if this is your number one issue, what I do say is that those consequences for Donald Trump, the backlash should be loud. It should be clarion. It should be clarifying for him that he cannot betray these chief abiding American principles and still expect to be considered a conservative standard bearer.
Rebekah Haynie, really fascinating to hear your take. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.
I want to bring in Republican strategist and former deputy chief of staff for HUD under Donald Trump, Michael Singleton. Also here, senior political correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, Molly Ball. I'm curious what your take is to the reaction to what she said, the notion of there being electoral consequences for Donald Trump based on this. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me that social conservatives are angry about the stance that Trump has taken, but he's clearly making a calculation that they're not going to have anywhere else to go, and that by the time November comes around, as she was saying in that segment, they're going to realize there are only two candidates in this election. Some states there may be other candidates on the ballot, but realistically, two major candidates. They're not going to vote for Joe Biden if what they care about is the lives of what she called the preborn, and so they could stay home. But I'd be surprised. The evangelical vote in particular, the social conservative vote, has been the strongest cohort of voters behind Donald Trump. They have turned out at historic rates. They have supported Trump at historic rates. I think he's making a calculation that at the end of the day they may grumble, but they're going to come home to him.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 150%. I mean, the question is, you stay home and then President Biden wins the election and Democrats take control of the House and you barely maintain control of the Senate or regain control of the Senate because you're angry. I mean, look, these folks have argued for 50 plus years that they wanted this return to the states. The Supreme Court did that. Now people are getting the opportunity to vote on this issue, and you're seeing Democrats and even a sizable percent of Republicans that are saying, look, we think people should have the right to make this decision for themselves, families and their doctors, not the government. That's small government. I'm a conservative. We believe in small government. Donald Trump is absolutely right on this issue to say, let states decide, put it on the ballots, and if people want it, then that's their right.
But the fear, of course, of putting it on the ballot and putting it in different states is that they've not been successful when it's returned to the ballots in recent times. And you see in Alabama, flipping a special election, you see on different ballots. I think it was Kansas as well, just to name one. I think Ohio had something similar on the ballot. So the concern is if you put it to the states and up to the people, then it will not favor those who are in favor of anti-abortion rhetoric.
Every single state that has voted on this issue since the overturning of Roe, which, let's keep in mind, was only less than 2 years ago, every single state, including deep red states like Kansas and Kentucky, have voted for the abortion rights side of the ballot, whatever that was. But, I think if Donald Trump thinks that he's sort of ripping off the Band-Aid here and putting the issue to rest, this is not going to do it. There are still too many questions outstanding. There are a lot of things he hasn't taken a stance on, such as he did not say if there is some kind of federal legislation and he's president, would he sign or veto it? He's a voter in the state of Florida that's going to have an abortion initiative on the ballot this fall. How is he going to vote on that that choice between the current 6-week ban and a more liberal standard that goes up to the point of viability? What about the medication abortion ban that the Supreme Court is considering right now? So there's still a lot of unanswered questions about how he wants the state of abortion policy to move forward. And I think for that reason, he's going to keep getting questions about this.
Really important to think about what's left. I mean, this was a week later since you had that 6-week ban announced in Florida, and he said he's going to take a week to say something, and this is the way he does it with unanswered questions. I'm wondering, though, what impact this has on his VP pick.
I mean, I don't think it matters. I think evangelicals are more than likely going to stick with Donald Trump. He chose Mike Pence because he needed to appeal to that community. He no longer needs Mike Pence, in my personal view. They're with him. I think Donald Trump needs to look for a running mate that is going to bring something different to the table. Maybe it's a woman, maybe it's a person of color, and in terms of a person of color, maybe someone from the Latino diaspora, because that's now the largest minority group in the country, and they are very diverse in terms of their politics. I mean, unlike African Americans, where 90+% of us are mostly Democrats, the Latino vote is pretty mixed, it's pretty split, and so that's the direction I think he should go tactically.
You know, interesting, you're thinking about evangelicals. We know that Mike Pence said that it was a slap in the face, this statement. But we also reached out to the influential evangelical leader, Bob Vanderplaats, who says that Trump's stance, quote, is deeply disappointing. The pro-life community is looking for more. Just thinking about that statement, of course, I do wonder what the impact is going to be given the support in the past.
I think what you hear in all of these statements, again, is a recognition that they just don't have any leverage over him. He is the leader of the party. He has a following that is slavishly devoted to him, and they can cry and scream all they want, but he's the one who is correctly seeing where the middle of the electorate is on this issue.